Times Like These from the Foo Fighters' 2002 album, One by One. This band is great. They are on their A game on this song and this album. We've got so much to talk about today. Patrick Shipley from the band Faithhead's with us. And as you can imagine, there's a lot going on in these times we're talking about, so there's a lot to talk about today. So buckle up, stay tuned, we're ready to rock.
Welcome to the Song and Verse Podcast, a discovery of God's Word, one song and a few verses at a time. Here's your host, Rockin' Odd Todd.
Hello and welcome to this episode of the Song and Verse Podcast. I am your host, Rocking Odd Todd. We're so happy you've decided to join us today. There was so much going on in the world of music in the early 2000s, and there was a lot going on in the world as well. I think about 9/11 in 2001 and a lot of tragedy that came from that, and then many years afterwards, wars and just a lot of destruction going on. And when you think about this song, Times Like These, it really starts to talk about the difficulties in life and how you reset and how you figure out a way to just continue living and how you learn to change direction, move in a different manner, and just maybe be a better person in certain aspects of life. And today, Patrick Shipley's going to be with us on this episode, the bassist from the band Faithhead, and also a content contributor to JesusWired.com. And I'm telling you what, Patrick brings a lot of insight to some of this, and he really, really helps bring in what the whole COVID and just the civil unrest going on right now, how we can look at that a little differently and how we can take this time to be who Christ has called us to be. So this is going to be great, and I hope you enjoy this episode as much as I did. And with that, today we have with us Patrick Shipley from the band Faithhead. He plays bass for them, and he's also a columnist for JesusWired.com. How's it going, Patrick?
It's going good. Rockin' Odd Todd. It's good to see you again.
You too, man. So you guys are doing some crazy moving up there. It's been a little tough for us to get together.
Yes, and I tell you what, I missed our conversations, and hopefully I see a light at the end of the tunnel. I'm hoping it's not my death, but right now I'm hoping it's
every day we're lucky just to wake up, right?
Yeah, I'm wanting to know what door we walk through to enter the Twilight Zone, because every day it's something different, it seems. I don't know how else to say it. I mean, it's like we're literally living out an episode of the Twilight Zone.
Well, and what's kind of crazy is the last time you and I met up was in November for a show that Faithhead did down in Florida, and it almost kind of began with that, because most Novembers are not that cold in Florida. For whatever reason, you guys brought some of that down with you.
We did. You can blame us for that. It's fine. It's okay. You're welcome.
Hey, well, being an old Kentucky boy, when it gets a little cool in Florida, I don't have a problem with it. But the natives get a little restless, though. So
you have real winters up there in Kentucky.
Oh, definitely. So Times Like These is the song from the Foo Fighters we're going to be talking about today. And boy, you're right. It's like, Twilight Zone. What door opened up and what kind of time are we living in? So, I kind of let that be the lead here, but I also want to hear just in general, you've been in music a while and you've been a fan of music for a long time. So when it comes to your life and your faith and that moment when you said, look, Christ is the answer, how did that all culminate?
Well, I mean, it was a series of huge leaps forward and, several steps back. And it's a series of realizations that, I found Christ early, as I was 9 years old. And then, but, at a 9-year-old, you're innocent.
Mm-hmm.
And then when I got into middle school, and, as a teenager, I was 13, I didn't know anything about sex or anything like that.
Sure.
And where music kind of ties all that in, I was 13 years old, 1988, watching this band called Motley Crue and this other no-name band on stage called Guns N' Roses, using words I'd never heard before, one starting with F, and it's a very confusing time talking about oral sex terms that you've never heard before and things like that. And
right.
So that started my first initial tumble, away from God, trying to, what is all this stuff? And then ultimately returning at the age of 16, and then answering a call to preach at 18.
Mm-hmm.
And then after I got into college, it was like a whole new world, of depravity, this, so to speak. And that's where, I was buck wild for a number of years.
Mm-hmm.
After that, I got some, I think I may have told you this. I got some bad advice because I was like my sophomore year in college. There was a part of me that just wanted to go to like Bible school, and I just wanted to study the Bible and just let my life go in that direction. And then there was a friend who I trusted dearly. He said, "You know what? You need to live your life before you should tell people how to live theirs." And was not good advice. And because at the time I'm like, yeah, I think I could do some more partying and more women. That sounds like that was keen advice. Young and dumb there. I'm like, yeah, I should live my life. And
it's funny that parallels a lot of what I saw in college too. Some dudes that went off to seminary and things of that nature and kind of came back with that same mindset. But I'm like, what exactly kind of happened there?
But it was what was meant to be, because the scars of those years of being a prodigal, have taught me, they've humbled me to a point where I've learned over the years that God does not call the perfect. Mm-hmm. And I think that is the biggest lie that Satan tries to sell the world, is if you're going to be Christian, you got to be perfect.
Oh, right,
and
right.
You can look at the Bible; it is replete with examples of these imperfect people that He calls to do His work. And people like Jonah. Jonah was a racist,
right?
And then after he did what God, forget the whale part, where he dies in the belly of the whale and gets spit back up and is alive again and all that, and then he goes and does what God tells him to do. Then he gets mad because these people are, his enemies and then he cries about it.
Right. Right.
I mean, it's just one of many examples. You can pick out Moses, Paul, and
the story that kind of brings you and I together, of Alice Cooper,
right.
With Fridays with Alice, that's kind of where you and I have met and really, started this relationship. And modern day prodigal tale.
Right.
And you want to look at Alice Cooper, the character and the man, it's almost like a tale of biblical proportion and parallels a lot of biblical characters as well. So
yeah, I got an opportunity to actually talk about Alice and how his music kept me tied to my faith during those prodigal years. Mm-hmm. On our J Radio playlist, they asked Faithhead if we would, which is J Radio is a part of J103 here in Chattanooga, and they asked us to do a playlist of some of our favorite artists, and I included some Alice Cooper songs, and the one, Second Coming, that I always credit is, hearing the church bells and from my duplex,
right?
Just convicting my heart, and I always credit that, but. Yeah, Alice Cooper, I don't think people realize, how deep, the gospel is rooted in a lot of his music. Mm-hmm. Because, Alice is a mirror, but definitely the tie there, and I've enjoyed this relationship, and I'm looking forward to, pointing out all the other things. And I mean, Alice is not the only one. I mean, there's other bands as well.
Definitely.
Have got a message that I think is God sent. But
And that's really where, song and verse and this whole podcast is heading as well. Um, it's almost like God has swung the door open, so to speak, for other people to come in and talk
Yeah.
and really share and look into the lives of so many musicians that have been touched that way. So it's pretty awesome to see God leading out through Alice to guys like you and other people that have been on the show that have been able to come and express that as well. So,
Well, what the irony is that, we talked earlier off camera talking about things being cyclical, and things, and again, after I got married and I came back to God, in a serious way, and this is ultimately where faith had started. I did a purge again for the last time of my CD collection, where I took out because I went back, over the years and rebought the Slayer, rebought the Danzig, I rebought the Ozzy, and I realized that, garbage in, garbage out. Now granted, 14 years later, well, it's more than 14 years now, but after I did that, but I realized I can go back and listen to that stuff with a more keen eye or ear.
And there's some definite truth in some of that as well. So,
well, there are, but it doesn't affect me, like it used to. Mm-hmm. And I think people don't realize how powerful music is. The song and the verse part of music bypasses the brain, goes straight into the heart and soul of a person. Mm-hmm. And I don't care what anybody says. Bands like Rage Against the Machine, they pushing a political agenda through music is just as strong as it is through social media or the news.
Sure.
And, music has always been a part of communicating a message.
Well, and there's a guy that we spoke to in a few episodes back by the name of Christopher Long that brought up a really good point about, we can listen to the same album over and over and over and over again, and it becomes part of us. But it's the same way with scripture. He'd been questioned many times, why do you keep reading it over and over again? Why do you keep reading it? Didn't you soak it up the first time? And he's like, no, there's more to be found that I didn't see the first time around. It's the same way with music. The more you do it, the more it becomes a part of you. And so you're right. Everything that you're saying there makes a whole lot of sense,
I'm happy that I'm making sense today. No, there's a lot of songs that, that are metaphors that I just think that it has to have some form of divine inspiration. But then again, as a listener, we also imprint our own meanings on a lot of songs, especially this song, Times Like These. Mm-hmm. There is if you were of the Christian perspective, to me, there's almost a prodigal element to it, and I think that's one of the reasons why I like this song so much. But if there was ever a song, and I can't remember exactly when this song came out, but it's
that one, I believe I had it written out 2002. It was on the One by One album.
But it's one of those songs that those first few notes kick in, you can just feel it swelling up in your heart. It's definitely it's a song that takes me to a good place. And a song that musically, which is it's not overly complicated, but it's not easy by any stretch of the imagination. But it projects an energy, ultimately, I think that is positive and is introspective and has greater meaning than what's written.
Right.
Looking at it in black and white.
Well, and from that aspect, were there any particular lyrics, and before we go there, the funny thing is, we, like you said, we were talking a little bit off camera, and we talked about this song months ago.
Oh yeah,
before this whole COVID thing went down, or the unrest in the public and all this stuff that we're seeing on the news even took place.
before it really hit the fan.
Yeah.
I mean, it was like you saw the arm drawn back,
right,
and the fan blades are turning, but you didn't.
Yeah, society hadn't stopped yet. Let's put it that way.
Yeah.
It was kind of in the media, kind of floating around out there that this was an issue. But since then, it's like, I've seen memes and videos of everybody. I saw this one girl post something about her having a conversation with herself from like 3 or 4 months prior. That prior self was like, what? What are you talking about? Toilet paper and all these other things in the scenario.
Brilliant.
And yeah, totally so you're onto something there. But are there certain lines in this song that hit you the most, or is it the musical dynamics, or what?
Well, it's got a great bass line, I will say that as a bassist.
Well, I never suspected you might pick out a bass line and like it,
Well, like Inagata Davida, because it opens up with a great bass line.
Definitely.
Iron Butterfly for you flower power people.
Yeah.
When the COVID thing hit, this was the song that clicked automatically in my mental jukebox. I was off work for 2 weeks. And I just remember I was standing outside, and my neighbor across the street, who I've had, hey, how you doing? It's good to see you. Are you doing all right? Yeah. But we never really had a real conversation. And we got to talking about, his son Donovan. Donovan loves Lightning McQueen, and I'm starting to learn, a little bit about this family. Has been living across just 20 steps away for maybe 3 or 4 or 5 years.
Right.
And I've never, as a Christian, and I knew he was a Christian fellow, because, we would see each other come out Sunday morning. Here we are. We're all piling into our cars to drive away to our mutual churches of worship.
Right.
And we're all coming back in at lunchtime, giving the, hey, how you doing? But I just thinking to myself, it's times like these I've learned to live again, because had I not been home during those 2 weeks, I would have never had an opportunity to walk across the street and stand at my neighbor's fence and talk to him.
Yeah.
You know why? Because we're doing this all day long.
Mm-hmm.
I'm doing this. I'm on Facebook. I'm on Twitter. And I've thought, over the last few weeks, months, really, it's been 3 or 4 months now, as we've cleaned out our house, I think we've probably, I've taken, I'm almost embarrassed to say this, I'm probably well in the double digits van loads of stuff I've taken to Goodwill, clothes, toys that my kids no longer play with. And I think, just my mental jukebox going off. It's times like these you learn to give again. And I found these 2 chairs, little plastic chairs that we had bought, for like one of the girls' birthday parties. And of course, I've got 3 girls, and, there were some boys coming over. So I had these little Lightning McQueen chairs that we bought, so no boys had to sit into a frozen princess chair. And I found them in the garage. And I'm like, Donovan loves Lightning McQueen. I should take it to my neighbor and give it to him. And I took, had that not happened, I would have just chunked it into the dumpster, or whatever it was. And I got to thinking about it. It is times like these you learn to love people again, because you see something that means maybe nothing to you, but it could mean everything to them. And the cyclical nature of it, and it's times like these, time and time again. You could be talking about somebody who's lost their home in a tornado. We had a bad, we were talking about, what verse of the Bible of Revelation that we're living in right now. In Chattanooga, we just got hit back in March when all this crazy stuff with COVID started.
Is that the same one that went through Nashville?
Yeah. Same one that went through Nashville, carried all across Monteagle Mountain, tore right through Chattanooga, took out my lot, my Masonic Lodge I'm a part of. We do all kinds of charity work for Tennessee Baptist Children's Home. It's going to have to be demolished to the ground.
Wow.
Man, there's so many people lost their homes. I have two lodge brothers who lost their homes. But you could take that same song and apply it to that. You learn to live again. How do you live without a home?
Right.
How do you, And that's one of the things about, being a musician out on the road. You learn what the bare necessities are. What do you take with you out on the road, and, what you don't take. You don't know how much a shower means to you until you've been on the road for 2 or 3 days and you don't get one.
Well, one of the interesting things for me was when you brought this song up, I hadn't listened to the Foo Fighters in a long time, and they are a great band, man. Dave Grohl and just that whole dynamic. I mean, you could go down a rabbit hole about Nirvana, but I would often wonder how much Dave Grohl was the integral part of that band, looking at where the Foo Fighters are now. I don't know.
Well, I hate to make this confession right off the bat.
Right.
When Foo Fighters came out, I didn't like them.
Right.
I really did not like them at all. And I don't know. I mean, and I tell you when I did.
Okay.
I did come to like the Foo Fighters. They were on tour with Red Hot Chili Peppers. And this was a long time ago. And they were just kind of coming into being a big band.
Sure.
I think after this tour with the Red Hot Chili Peppers, they were the headliner after that. I think it was the By the Way tour for Chili Peppers, whatever it was. But I just, up to that point, I didn't hear anything in the music that I liked.
Sure.
But I tell you that
they definitely evolved.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Well, what I loved, what made me a believer in the Foo Fighters after that was David Grohl. We're standing, I'm up like in the nosebleed on the far left if you're facing the stage.
Sure.
And I kind of had like a side stage view from above. And he hops down off the stage and he runs out into the crowd. And he actually ran up into our section.
Wow.
And I mean, I was probably 20 feet away from him. He just kind of ran in and then ran out. And there was a part of me is like, I bet I could tackle him and take his Epiphone, or not his Epiphone, but his Gibson Explorer guitar. There's a split second. But after that moment, I'm like, he actually cares enough about the fans that are in the sucky seats.
Yeah.
Run up there and shock them.
Well, and there's numerous YouTube videos showing that kind of stuff too.
Oh yeah,
yeah.
But it made an impression on me, not only as a fan, but as a musician as well, to give that moment back to those, And I always try to. I'm not like I'm somebody famous or anything like that, but people come. When I find out people come a distance to see us play. It's like when we were down in Florida, CJ, I know him now as CJ, is Charles, but he drove all the way from the other side of Florida. I'm like, that is somebody I want to know.
Sure.
That's somebody I want to create a relationship with. If I've done something that has impacted them, write a song, whatever it is, it comes all the way to come see me play, I want to have a relationship with that person.
Sure.
And
that's the way we were designed to be anyway, as far as creation's concerned. So,
yeah, I mean, it's all about relationships. And, I don't know, what else to add to that. But the Foo Fighters, after that, I'm not a fan of their first album at all. But, I mean, there's a few songs I like. I have to go back to something I said before off camera. I kind of have a punk attitude in some way. I'm like the anti-whatever is cool. And, Nirvana, I had a couple, I had like Nevermind, and what was the one that followed it, In Utero, but that was it. I came out of that, my influences came out of the 80s where music was something that was master, the 80s guys, the Shredders, and but Nirvana, when Nirvana came out, they were completely the opposite. They were like it was not clean and it wasn't overly produced. And there was a part of me that liked it because, again, I'm kind of the punk guy. And then there was the element of, it just kind of killed the hair bands.
Right. And some of those hair bands were just starting to take off too.
Oh yeah, I think you had some casualties, whether you want to admit it, like Skid Row. It
Mm-hmm.
kind of came in on the skirt tails of Guns N' Roses.
Yeah.
They'd gotten out of the bands that had kind of came in the tail end of the glam scene, but made that quick conversion over, like Motley Crue did, where they ditched their lace for jeans and leather.
Sure. And the hairspray was combed out.
Yeah.
I guess a part of the trail that I was heading down a little bit with Foo Fighters is, for me, Best of You, Monkey Wrench, times like
Act
these.
actors.
Do what?
Act actors.
Yeah. And so, when I was thinking of times like these, I was already in that mindset of Foo Fighters after you brought that up. And then Best of You, it almost kind of meshed together for me, because it's like, in times like these, God's asking for the best of us.
Yeah.
And not that we shouldn't be striving for that on a daily basis, but like you're saying, it's like, here I am taking time to talk to somebody that's been right there
For years.
Right. And I even kind of noticed myself, whether you're wearing the mask or whether you're 6 feet apart or whatever it is, for me, it's like there's this common decency to just think about what the other person's going through. And I don't know that I was necessarily doing that on a daily basis like I should have been before. It's almost like this catapulted me back into that mutual respect category. Does that make sense?
Yeah. I mean, I think people talk about technology, especially social media, how it has connected everybody.
Mm-hmm.
I think there's a definitive argument saying, and that it's actually segregating us along political lines. It's probably segregating us along, so many different ways. I mean, you could parse it out in so many different categories. Before we were talking off camera, talking about different podcasts and things like that. It's very easy to wind up in an echo chamber and just hearing ideas and what you think back to you. And it's one of those things I struggle, try not to get into an echo chamber. There's a lot of people that I just I like what, some people say. Talking about Candace Owens.
Mm-hmm.
She brings a very interesting perspective. Of course, I'm not female. Of course, I'm not African American either. And she brings a very different perspective, it seems like, from other African American females. But, there's some that love, Candace Owens, and some that hate. But,
well, and you brought up Joe Rogan off camera too. And, for some of our audience, I get it. His mouth could be kind of foul-mouthed and everything else. But there's a talking point and a narrative. And the thing I love about Joe Rogan is he don't care. He just wants to sit down and talk.
Yeah, I don't think he. I can't. I've watched enough, I think, over the years of his podcast. I don't see a clear agenda other than getting on there and asking questions.
Yeah.
I mean, he wants. Why do you think that?
Well, and that's what this used to all be about.
My point is, I'm listening to different perspectives other than conservative white people.
Right.
I'm trying to. It's like I'm trying to expose my mental immune system to other ways of thinking and how other people. And I'm not I'm not getting offended because someone thinks differently than I do.
Well, and I think that's important, especially from a, American perspective. That's what's been founded on, so to speak.
And going, kind of tying the song back into this discussion, it was a reason why we said we're going to talk about this one, is we're going to have to learn to live again as Americans. The whole gist of, as a Christian, I want to share the gospel with people. I want to compel them to look at Jesus Christ. That's my sole job, is to share the gospel. Nowhere in my faith am I supposed to convert someone. There's no, I think this is one of, if I had a critique of Joe Rogan, I can only point to one person that I know he's had on his cast that is, obviously a Christian, but he never talks about faith.
Mm-hmm.
He's never had like a J. Warner Wallace on there, an apologist, or a Dr. Frank Turek. I would have loved to have seen Joe Rogan sit down and talk to Ravi Zacharias.
Sure.
That would have been a phenomenal, but he never, it would have been a phenomenal interview. Or even a John Lennox. Mm-hmm. John Lennox would be a phenomenal, mathematician, believer, apologist. I want him to have those people on there too, because, faith is a real thing.
Yeah. I mean, even Francis Scott Collins, and to bring in, not just some Joe Schmo off the street that says he has faith, but
someone learned it.
Right.
Not only in theology, but in science.
Right.
There's just as many learned believers of science. Newton, his whole thing of learning about the natural world was to become more knowledgeable of his God, who created it.
Well, and I think another interesting point with that, and I don't mean to go down that rabbit hole, but we're talking about a lot of people that went out trying to disprove the faith as well. And next thing you know, they're at the feet of Jesus saying, nope, this is actually legit.
That's J. Warner Wallace's.
Yeah.
He was a cold case detective in L.A. And I think that would be somebody easy for him to get on there.
Yeah. Lee Strobel, even from the Chicago Tribune, would be.
Oh, yeah. That's a very popular one too.
Right, definitely.
But what I'm scared of, it seems like freedom of speech of all things is so under attack because it might offend somebody. They're pulling Aunt Jemima, they're pulling Land O'Lakes
without looking at the stories behind these things too. Right.
I mean, it's just foolishness. Mm-hmm. And then I'm sure there's somebody who may see this video says that you are a privileged white man commenting on this stuff. I'm a good old American mutt.
Right.
Just like the guy I'm looking at across from me. I'm an American. And that's all that matters. White, black, red, yellow, whatever. I have no issues with you having, pride, from whatever nationality you're descended from. Great.
Sure.
But that's not what makes America great. It's the integration of all these different cultures, and that's what makes us great. And having the freedom to express that diversity, whether you agree with it or not, is what makes us great. And I think we're going through a time now where we're going to have to learn to live with each other again with different opinions. I think all this mass censorship, this cancel culture that we're in is killing our democracy. It's killing our freedoms, whether people want to believe it or not. I can't think of the guy's name. I used to be able to quote it almost verbatim. He goes, you know what happens after you're offended? Nothing. You don't get cancer. You don't fall over dead. Nothing happens after you're offended. John Cleese, there's another video I posted on Facebook of all, talking about people about the need to be offended. These are the times we're learning to give people space to have opinions, again, and learning to love those people again.
Sure.
It's that cyclical part of history, time and time again, where we're learning all this stuff again over. If you go back to, after they founded this nation, they're talking about the Constitution. They asked Benjamin Franklin when he comes out, what did y'all do today? Or what did y'all create today? A republic. If we can keep this democracy, we might just be going through this process of where we're having to figure out if somebody's over there, when people like the KKK came up and did something, people just ignored them.
Right.
Like less than a percentage of the population that's, maybe 1%. I'll be generous. I think maybe 2% of the population that's white supremacist of the Caucasian population. 2%.
Yeah.
Were we worried about them? No, because they were such a small minority. They were just a fly on the wall, a mosquito that you swatted away. And for some odd reason, we're giving all this attention to these voices that just a few years ago, we just learned to just ignore. You have the right not to look. You have the right to not listen. You have the right to not purchase. And, as I tell everybody, I'm voting with my wallet. It seems to be more effective when
it's interesting, and I never really thought about it, but this is a lot like what happened, and I can't remember the exact label of it, but when Tipper Gore and that group of
DMRC.
yes, when the Washington moms, so to speak, got together and were basically like, nope, can't listen to that. What, Two Live Crew, Dee Snider,
Oh yeah,
all of that
Rental
stuff was
Music
kind of,
Resource Center.
Yeah.
It was a big deal, and it's
Yeah.
like we've completely forgotten.
Yeah. I mean, I remember that was huge. I mean, they didn't have the little parental advisory stickers until then. And
now it's included in the artwork.
Right.
They don't even put a sticker on it anymore. They just print it right there with the album artwork.
Right. And it's almost like a badge of honor
or
something,
I completely get it. Tying it into this song, times like these, I feel like we're having to learn all this all over again.
Right.
And this is a time that where we're going to have to remember, oh yeah, we have freedom of speech, but we also have freedom of choice.
Right.
Freedom of choice to ignore your stupid butt.
And what's good for the goose is good for the gander, and not only one way or the other,
I'm sitting here thinking, looking at these lyrics, who is going to be that street light shining for reason? Is it going to be like a Joe Rogan? We need to find our middle ground.
So something you said earlier, maybe stop and think a little bit. There's so many people I come into contact with on Facebook, most of them from high school and college and stuff of that nature. But there's been a couple posts that have really sparked my attention because, they're representing a side that I may not agree with, but I had to kind of stop and message them because I like to do it on a person-to-person basis, not in this public forum. I don't think that helps anything. And I just had to kind of stop and say, look, I don't understand where you're coming from here. I think you and I, the person that I'm in conversation with on Facebook, I'm like, you and I have way more in common than you're portraying this to be. And when we paint with such a broad stroke and such a wide roller, that it's really a detrimental place to be. And I think that's what you're really kind of talking about, because there's way more in common. You sit down face to face with somebody with a cup of coffee, and I guarantee you're going to talk about things that you agree about, and things that you're not giving humanity, that you're not putting that human element into this discussion.
That's where social media parses us out.
Right. And it does it on an algorithm type basis too. And that's another thing that I thought about is, like you were saying, your feed is feeding off of an algorithm that's like, okay, this person thinks this way. Let's just feed them everything in that box, like you were saying.
Yeah. Joe Rogan had an excellent quote when he was talking, I forget who he was talking to. The whole new wave of social outrage that we are experiencing right now is being created by algorithms.
Oh gosh, yeah.
I don't even think it's being driven by human beings with an agenda. Maybe, but it seems to be. I mean, if you look at some of the interviews of some of the former CEOs of Facebook, I mean, it's that, we talk about it in our song, Mindless Automatons. You get that dopamine rush.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, I got a like. Oh, I got a comment.
Right.
You go back to your phone. I mean, this right here is what's driving our society right now. We are so trained to look at screens. Even right now, even though we are part, and don't get me wrong, I've enjoyed our conversation prior to even the interview.
Well, and being where I'm at now in this, ministry, and in these, on this platform, I struggle with that, because it's like, this is the base that God has called me to talk through. But at the same time, it's like, I don't like any of this.
Right.
And so it's a struggle. In some ways, it's like he has to just kick me in the butt to keep me going doing this stuff.
This is going to, I'm going to admit this on a public forum, but, last night at our show down in Huntsville, there was two guys there, Will and Chris Portwood, who, they were in Brian, who's now our guitarist, for Faithhead, in their previous band. And I hadn't seen them in a long time. And great guys. My point here is it was just good to give them a hug and see them. I mean, it was just how unnatural it was, just kind of like, no, I'm doing this. I am going to make human contact.
Right.
People, because you don't know when it's going to be the last time.
You really don't.
I've been working on, I'm going to let this one out of the bag. I've been working on a song. I wrote the lyrics for it, kind of got the arrangement. I don't have it. I say arrangement in the sense of how I want the format of the song to go.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a song called Today Is That Day. And I'm wanting Jason Beavers, our old vocalist, I sent it down to him to kind of take a stab at it, because I didn't want to do it all myself. Come up with some music and a melody. But I've got this song in me called Today Is That Day, because you never know when's that last time you're going to give your friend a hug.
Yeah, definitely.
It goes back to almost a year ago, and I lost my long time childhood friend, Gary Evans. And Gary and I had been texting one another. He was trying to get another band off the ground, and he was wanting me to play bass. And of course, I already had the Faithhead thing going. And Gary was phenomenal talent. He was a singer. He could rap like nobody's business. Was the best rapper. And we were texting one another, and we just, hooking up and talking face to face when we could. Of course, he's had a wife. He'd just gotten married, and maybe about a year right before he died. And I got a message from Mike Creasman, from one of our mutual friends on Facebook, that he had died. And the first thought that came through my head is, we'll never get to finish that conversation.
Jeez.
That was the first thought. It wasn't, he's dead. It's just that we have an unfinished conversation between us about something that we loved. Wow. And I was wanting to I was going to fund his next album. I believed in him. I just wanted him to make sure, I was talking about getting his focus right, what the kind of music he was wanting to put out there. Because I wasn't going to be doing anything about weed or anything like that. But I'm like,
right.
You're above that. You're better than that.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, he had a demo that he did that was great, but it had some stuff on it. I wasn't going to produce.
Mm-hmm.
But it's like, but there's several songs here. Like he had a song called "Sacrifice" that I had a version of that I contributed to, that I got a recording of, and it's. But I was thinking, man, after that, this is, after we will never finish that conversation. We will never play on stage together again. I thought there was time. I thought I figured by now, I guess, back then that I may be doing like a gig with him maybe once every 2 or 3 months as his time allowed and my time allowed. But that opportunity is gone. And I'll never get it. I'll never get it again. I'll never get to be on stage with him again.
Right.
The time was short.
Mm-hmm.
And, I'm not a young man. I mean, I'm compared, who you compare me to, I'm not young, middle-aged man, but.
Well, and I think, everything that we've talked about in this episode, that's the number one word in this narrative is time. And in a few short months, you see where the nation and everything has been taken, and where our thought process is, and it all boils down to time. And what are you going to do with that time?
Yeah,
it's a daunting question, but it's one that when we wake up every morning, it keeps kind of going through my mind over and over now, because it's like, the first thing that I thought of when I heard this whole COVID thing was, well, crap, we're all going to get it. We're all going to die.
Wow.
I mean, seriously, when you think about what the narrative was at that point,
It was
I mean,
grim.
yeah, it's like, 2 million people in the States. And I'm like, well, I live in Brevard County, which is the hub of, so much with the cruise line and everything. It's like we get a lot of folks coming through here.
Yeah.
And so I'm like, this stuff's going to spread like wildfire based on what they were projecting and saying and stuff. Now I've changed my opinion over time, and there's that word time again. It's like, the narrative of our lives, that is the one word that really kind of equalizes and dominates us. What's going to happen in the next 5 minutes, let alone the next, 50 years.
Death is the great leveler of men.
Yeah.
It puts us, puts us all on the same footing.
Yeah.
And I'm not trying to get dark or morbid, but, learning to appreciate the time that we have. Like I said, I'd like to get this song written and get it out there because today is that day. In these times, what is important to me, what I've learned that I need to put my cell phone down. I'd like to get rid of it and get a flip phone, but it's just not realistic. But I'm going to learn. I used to read. I just used to devour books. I mean, I'd be reading 2 or 3 books at a time, and I got a stack of them. I was like, I had every intention of reading these books as I was packing them up to move. I am going to read these books. You know why? Because I'm an avid reader, but because of life carrying me away, I have unlearned to live in these times. And I think God is sending a definite message to our country, whether you want to acknowledge it or not. And what does it mean? And I'm going to go back to, I'm going to get hardcore here. Jesus talking about love your neighbor. Who is your neighbor? It's the person standing beside us. There's a part of me, the punk rock element of me, that wants to go out and not wear a mask. But am I being a good neighbor by not? Now, the American patriot part of me is like, government, do you have the right to tell me not? Where is the fine line? What is the fine line between being a good believer and loving your neighbor and being a good patriot? What is the line there?
Yeah. And I think you really have to search, the spirit dwelling within you to tell you that. Yeah. Because
I don't know.
I get you. I'm right there with you. Well, and there's one more point that I want to make with the whole neighbor scenario. You don't have to agree, and you don't even necessarily have to get along to love your neighbor. And I think there's something in the air that makes people think that's love. Getting along, agreeing, following every narrative, doing all this stuff, that's love, and it's not.
Yeah.
So, that's the one thing I just wanted to sneak in there.
It's a hard thing for people to swallow, that I can love you and not agree with your lifestyle.
Right.
I can love you, Todd, but you're going to have to cut back on your crack addiction that you have, Dude,
you just pointed that out in front of the whole public.
Well, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to out you in front of the world, but
I thought you were going to tell me to take off the Alabama hat, but okay.
My wife's from Alabama, and we're not going to go any further from this conversation about that. Being from Tennessee, not that I'm honest, I don't have a dog in that fight. No pun intended.
Well, and I'm a Kentucky boy, so whatever. So it's a ball cap. No, that's awesome, man. So let's go ahead and wrap this up a little bit. We've gone really long here, but this has been a great conversation with Patrick Shipley from Faithhead. And just tell us a little bit, like, what do you guys have planned? Do you got some any kind of concerts at all? Any kind of tour coming up? I know it's really iffy. So,
well, all of our festivals that we were scheduled for 2020, they have said, make it 2021.
Right.
So that is currently the plan. There's a bunch of them that we had slotted that we're going to do in 2021. The next show that we have is Chains Unchained it was Aurora, but now they've had to move it because of the COVID thing to a venue in Springfield, Missouri. I'm looking forward to it. It's kind of the creme de la creme of Christian hard rock metal acts, and the fact that we were asked to be a part of it of course, it feels that, it's everybody wants to play it, and we got to go this year because the Persuaded had to drop out, and there's a lot of bands that are having to drop out to be able, to do show. I mean, there's no money there,
right?
Bands.
Yeah,
and we're in a unique position to where we can go, because it's not that far for us. It's maybe 8 hours. It's hop, skip, and a jump. We're looking really forward to going to Chains Unchained first time, seeing our guys from Bradford War. There's a lot of acts there that I've been looking forward to seeing for the first time. Becoming Sons, 13 Minutes. There's several bands there that I've never seen live or shared a stage before with live. And we've told them that we're planning to stick around. We're playing on a Friday night. I'm really looking forward to that. We're planning on staying just to be there through Saturday and coming home on Sunday.
And you guys have had a lead singer change recently too, correct?
Yes. I was going to say, following up, you beat me to it.
Aha!
You get to hear for the third time live our new vocalist Adam Reed. Mm-hmm. Adam's doing a great job. He's still got a few bumps in the carpet he's got to work out, but the problem is normally we would have some local shows in order to get him prepared for a big event like this.
Sure.
And we've only had 2 opportunities. His first show was a festival. Poor guy. And
wow.
And then we got this local show last night down in Huntsville. Not local for us, but local enough. And this will be his third. He's going to get off easy at Chains Unchained, though, because it's only a 30-minute set.
Well, so it sounds like there's a lot on the horizon for Faithhead, and so...
Well, there's only, right now, after Chains Unchained, we might be going to Oklahoma in August. It's kind of up in the air. Funding is really the big thing, because we're not able to do live shows. Mm-hmm. So I think the next biggest thing for us is Breaker 27 Studios down in Fort Oglethorpe, Georgia, which is just right across the line, Tennessee-Georgia line. We're probably going to do a live concert. A in-studio concert, and
I think I just saw one of those recently, and it looked like it went off really well the way they handled it. So,
well, the plan was, when we were doing the auditions for the singer, we were going to have the final 3 candidates do like 1, 2, 3 songs, 1, 2, 3 songs, and we were going to let everybody on YouTube and social media vote for who they thought should be the singer. Well, Adam was the last man standing. So it's like, well, I don't guess we have to do that anymore. But I'd like to be able to introduce him to everybody, especially, we got a lot of fans that are just dying for us to come, back to their particular part of the country that we have actually made it to, like Oklahoma, sure, and Arkansas and Florida. Mm-hmm. That we would love to come back to. We want to give them an opportunity to see him and hear him. He's got a very unique voice. He kind of pulls back. You've heard the new single, right?
I did, yes.
Yeah, he kind of, I don't want to say he sounds like Jason, but kind of in that genre of singer like Jason. Whereas Jimmy was a little bit more hip-hoppy, but he kind of pulls us back to our alternative roots. Mm-hmm. But I'm excited for everybody to hear him. He's a great guy. A great brother in Christ, got a very, very good testimony, and I'm anxious for you to meet him.
Yeah, definitely. So that's going to wrap it up for this episode. We're going to, I'm sure we're going to have you back on, Patrick. In fact, this may end up being a 2-parter. I'm not sure yet.
Let's see. Yeah, I think I would break it down to like 6 15-minute
segments
and cut out the 45 minutes to an hour of rabbit holes chasing.
Well, every now and then it's fun to chase those rabbits every now and then. We're a bunch of Southern boys, heck.
Yeah. Well, it's like
stew.
Rabbit hole number 1. Okay, now that we're done chasing that rabbit hole, that'd be funny. It's like,
Awesome. Well, it's been great being with you, Patrick. You take care, and we'll definitely be speaking again soon.
well, I just, like I said, if you're passing through this way, let me know. Let's hook up for coffee or something along those lines, or dinner or something. But I'm hoping there has been some Florida interest apart from what you and I are associated with, and us getting back down that way. So
That's the world we live in now. Times like these take us to this point. So that's it for this episode. This is Rockin' Odd Todd signing out, and everybody take care and stay safe. Put that mask on now. Later. We hope you enjoyed this episode of the Song and Verse podcast. Hopefully it was an uplifting, honest, and meaningful experience for you. We do accept donations. If you feel led to give to the Song and Verse Ministries, check out songandverseministries.com/donate for a number of different ways to give back. And also be sure to check us out on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and Pinterest. We hope you tune in to the next episode of the Song and Verse podcast. Until then, keep searching for the DNA of God's Word found flowing through song.